Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist in Columbus, Georgia, and it is time for the Tea. Tea Time with Dr. Tarver is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. Welcome to our January episodes. This month we are going to be focusing on our Be Ye Not Discouraged series, and we are going to be talking about strategies to overcome the barriers that can interfere with us setting, reaching, and maintaining our goals. Today, we are going to be focusing specifically on doubt in this episode entitled Removing Doubt So You Can Shine Out. In this new year, people often make resolutions. We've created our vision boards, we have talked with people, we posted our goals on our social media pages, but sometimes we find that we have a dream and we have a desire, but we fail to see those results. So, what is going on that we're not reaching those goals? Maybe you started, but you don't finish it. It gets going, but it fizzles out. So, what is happening? As we meditate this month, I want to offer a few different things for you all to think about. If you are a faith based person, your scripture is Psalm 56:3. I'm using the New International Version, and that scripture reading is When I am afraid, I put my trust in you. If you are a person that likes a good mantra or a word of encouragement, I offer to you whatever is going to happen, you are already prepared to manage it. For those of you that like to listen to guided meditation, I encourage you to focus on ones that embrace fear or reduce anxiety and stress. There are a lot of different options available on YouTube, so I would encourage you to find out who your favorite person is and follow them. If you are a person that likes tones, then I encourage you to focus on tones this month that reduce anxiety and fear. So, what gets in the way of us being able to reach those goals? Fear can be very paralyzing. Oftentimes, what happens is we're overthinking. So we talk ourselves out of things. My mother used to say, when you talk long, you talk wrong. Or when you think alone, you think wrong. Right? So, in other words, the more I sit and meditate on things, particularly if I have a negative perspective, the more I'm likely to become fearful and begin to engage in what we call catastrophizing. So in catastrophizing, we think of all the worst possible case scenarios. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I've never done that before. No one around me has made it this far. I'm scared of change. I don't handle stress well. This negative self-talk then becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. So we call it a confirmation bias. We're maximizing the negatives about ourselves and minimizing the positives. And it's very easy to do that because you can probably more easily think of times when you've not been successful, when you've struggled and had a hard time being able to get through something than you can in thinking about some of the positive things. Automatic negative thoughts, we call them ants. They show up, you don't have to pay them. They will work overtime. They bring friends. They like to come and don't bring food with them. So it's very important that we're intentional about adding some positive thoughts. Because when we don't add positive thoughts, then we're less likely to want to take a risk. And we're more likely to feel judged or evaluated or receive feedback as negative, even if it's constructive. Because our fear is, hey, if I don't put myself out there, then no one can criticize me, no one can judge me. And what happens is in this social media lifestyle that we frequently live, then as you see, people put things out and there's always responses, right? So if I don't put myself out there, I don't have to worry about getting a response. It also happens to be that when we perceive ourselves to be inadequate, we believe that others perceive us in the same way. So in whatever ways we value or undervalue ourselves, we believe that other people have that same view of us. And the other thing we tend to do is we tend to hide our fears, or we attempt to try to hide our fears, which actually makes us more self-conscious. So you know that if you say it to yourself, never let them see you sweat, and you get out there, what do? You sweat because you become anxious because you're trying to be so controlled and trying to be sometimes so perfect, which is impossible, that it ends up causing you to actually make more mistakes. Another factor in our fears is that we will fail. And the truth is, you are going to fail at some things that you try. Failure is a part of life. Some things you'll pick up quickly. Some things you'll be very great at. Other things will require more time and practice. Some of them you may not be able to fully master. You may attempt them. Yoga is a good example of that. You see people who are very flexible and they can do these yoga poses, and then you see other people that try, but they may have to make some adjustments. But what happens is the spirit of fear affects our judgment. When we are fearful, we tend to be uncertain. And when we are uncertain, we tend to make mistakes. So as you can see, again, going back to that self-fulfilling prophecy, I'm creating this environment to set myself up not to be successful, because whatever I believe affects how I behave. So what do we do about that? One is to accept that fear is a part of life. Fear is going to be present with you. And instead of trying to avoid our fears or try to use unhealthy things like substances or just plain avoidance to try to manage it, we want to recognize that fear is a signal that I may be worried or uncertain, but that doesn't mean that there's necessarily danger and I need to divert my path. I encourage people to write down their fears, write down those worries, because once you write them down, you'll be able to organize them into categories. Is this actually a problem? One, because sometimes things are not a problem, we have just created a worry. So if I write it down, I'll be able to discern that's actually not really a problem. That's just a worry that I've created. If it is a problem, is it a problem that I can address? Sometimes there are things that happen that we can't address. We don't actually have any control over, right? So then I have my category, my column of, hey, it is something that I'm concerned about, but it isn't anything that I can do anything about. Then that leads us to, okay, it is actually something that is a problem and can be something that needs to be addressed. However, it is not necessarily something that needs to be addressed now. So we want to get into the habit of prioritizing. So often what ends up happening is we have all of these fears. I think of them like balls. You're juggling all these balls, all these fears. The goal is to be able to figure out which of these balls I can remove so I don't have to juggle so many. So this may be something that needs to happen, but not until the end of the month, or not for another 90 days, or not until next year. So it is not anything that I need to be addressing in this moment. And then our last category is the category of this is an actual problem. It is something that needs to be addressed, and it is something that needs to be addressed now. So what are my resources to be able to manage it? Now, if you are overwhelmed, so sometimes we write all these things down, and because fears can seem like they multiply, we can get very overwhelmed. And so if you get overwhelmed, that can interfere with you being able to problem solve. So that would be a good time to take a break, go back to that mantra we talked about before, the scripture, listening to some meditation, guided imagery. You might want to do some grounding things to be able to allow you to calm down and then come back and engage in the problem solving. Because the goal is that we want to move from problem identification to problem solving. Sometimes why we're not successful in our goals is because when problems come up, we get stuck in that problem. It gets overwhelming. We don't know how to address it. You end up venting about it, and then you don't end up moving anymore because you're stuck in that place. So we want to move to solutions. And with solutions, we want to focus on what skills do I already have to be able to address this? And what are some other resources I may need? If my skills by themselves are not enough, do I need additional training? Do I need to talk to somebody for support? Do I need to reach out to someone who has had a similar issue and resolved it? And that is a part of that brainstorming phase to be able to work through the problem solving. The other thing that I do is I encourage people to move from this place of I can't or I won't to I will try. I will try to do my best. I will try to solve this problem. I will try to move forward, because then you're recognizing that your ability to do or not do something is not the actual reflection of your worth. Sometimes what interferes with those goals again is that I think what I do defines who I am. Who you are is a product of who you are. You are worthy just by virtue of the fact that you are here, that you are showing up and you are being present. You don't have to have any bells and whistles in order for you to be of value. So when you make decisions, see them as opportunities for growth as opposed to measures of your value. This allows you to look at opportunities as an experience builder And that softens the voice of the doubt. You also want to create evidence to support that you are successful, right? Because as we have this negative self-talk and we tend to focus on the negatives, maximizing those negatives, minimizing those positives, we often forget what we've been successful at. As you move through this problem solving phase, as you reflect on other times you've been able to work through problems and come up with good solutions, that creates these new neural pathways about your ability to be successful. And then you can replace that outdated information that you were using that stays in that focus of I can't and I won't. And I want us to live in the space of you're making choices too, right? When you say, I'm going to try, you're choosing to try. You're showing up for yourself because fear is something that allows you to be paralyzed. It can allow you to be paralyzed. And so when you think of yourself as being able to have choices, it can help you think, hey, I'm not actually stuck. Now, fear serves a purpose. It's an emotion. We have emotions because emotions can alert us to different things. They can alert us to when we're happy. They can alert us to when things have saddened us. They can alert us to when there's danger. But when we spend a lot of time in fear, it can affect our ability to perceive a real threat from a perceived threat. So we want to engage in activities that promote a wide variety of emotions so that we're not just staying in fear so long. And showing emotions is healthy because, again, the goal is not for you to hide that you're feeling fearful, but that you're able to acknowledge that you have fear and the ways you're going to work through it. Some ways to do that is a well-placed joke. Hey, this is absolutely making me uncomfortable. You all know I don't like to be in front of people. And let me tell you something funny about how I tripped today and played it right on off. And that's what I'm going to do today, right? Because everyone can relate to feeling anxious. And so when we own it, we can make a little joke about it. Or even sometimes if you want to have some hype music or some calming music before you need to move forward with a goal that makes you uncomfortable, before you need to take that next step, if you want to revert back to that mantra, do that meditation, there's also opportunities for you to do that so you can acknowledge the fear is there and that I'm going to choose to walk forward even with this fear still present. It's important to read stories of other people who have experienced fear in their lives and overcome because you may learn some additional strategies from there, right? And so as we think about our problem solving, we want to use all available resources that we have, and that can be a source of inspiration for you. To reduce fear of failure, be present in the moment. Sometimes we're so reflective on what we didn't do in the past and projecting these fears onto the future that, again, it affects our concentration and increases our stress. So if we live in that, I am going to choose to do my best in this moment. I'm going to ground myself in this moment. What do I see, feel? What do I smell? What do I hear? What do I taste? Then it allows me to be present on the task at hand instead of a potential outcome or who might be watching. Now, regardless of which of these techniques you try, remember in this new year, we are working past our fears to be able to allow our shine to come out. So be ye not discouraged. And more importantly, be well.